On today's Locked On Bucks, we promised it. It is here. It is time to officially dissect the case for MVP for Giannis Antetokounmpo, what he's done through the course of this season, and how realistic are his chances of continuing to climb in that MVP race. We'll get into that conversation and some more updates on Khris Middleton out tonight against the Lakers. Eric Nehm did have a chance to sit down with Khris. So we'll recap some of what was said in that conversation and take a look at the rest of this West Coast road trip. All of that and more coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To Locked On Bucks, I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and viewable on YouTube as well, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's Locked On Bucks is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Camille, I think the Giannis conversation is going to take up a majority of what we had in store for today's show. But I suppose we'll start there. And I've mentioned this a number of times in that it's not, the be all end all, but it is a pretty good indicator of where we're headed in the MVP conversation each year. And that is the Basketball Reference MVP tracker. So for the longest time, Giannis was coming in at fourth in that, behind obviously Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Luka Doncic. They actually did have a somewhat interesting MVP conversation last night on Inside the NBA, but Giannis has since moved past Luka Doncic. Not a surprise there when you look at the standings. And at this point, he's almost neck and neck in their odds with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The downer of it is Nikola Jokic right now is the runaway favorite to win his third MVP. But we're starting to see Giannis slowly but surely continue to make some steps and climb that MVP ladder. And as we both mentioned with this schedule, which still remains the third most challenging schedule, you have a national game tonight, we think, against LeBron James in Los Angeles. You've got a big rematch against the Clippers on Sunday. You've got 2 games left against the Celtics. You've got a game left against the 76ers. There's going to be no Joel Embiid. But you do also have 2 games left against the Oklahoma City Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That right there to me seems like if Giannis is going to win the MVP, and we had this conversation last year too, those games, that's how he's going to do it is if the Bucks can finish when they had, 28 games, I think it was, left coming out of the All-Star break. I talked about this with Eric Nehm as well. If you could go like 20-8, that's a start because team success is a factor. But especially if he has big performances tonight against LeBron, and those matchups, especially against the Celtics, even though one of them, Boston's going to have nothing to play for, we would assume, with that final matchup. But if Giannis puts up big individual performances in those games, that seems like that is his best way to win the MVP. So all of that being said, I ask you this. Do you think Giannis can win the MVP this season?
Can he? Yes, he can. Is it likely at this point? Yeah, like is it likely? I'm not sure. Nikola Jokic is the front runner. Even during last night's broadcast of the game with the Nuggets and the Celtics, it was a conversation about the MVP race. And as Jokic was putting the razzle dazzle on and the final touches on that victory, you were just hearing the announcers again say, like, best basketball player in the world. Like, he is playing the best basketball in the world right now. He's clearly the MVP favorite, so on and so forth. And of course they were like, and Tatum's in the conversation, but it's really like a 2-man race between Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at this point. And they mentioned like Giannis is in the conversation, Tatum's in the conversation, but those 2 players have dominated a lot of the conversation so far throughout this season. But like we mentioned at the All-Star break, given the schedule that the Bucks have, like, it's a chance for Giannis to push that, because when you look at his numbers, Like Giannis is averaging over 30 points a game, which is more than he had in both his MVP seasons. Yeah. He's getting like 11 rebounds a game, career high in assists, career highs in field goal percentage, effective field goal percentage. He's in the top 3 in a lot of advanced metrics. I think he's like 4th in player efficiency rating. Like he's up there. Like he's doing all the things that you would say, hey, this is what makes a player most valuable to their team. It's just with the Bucks this season, I think part of why we haven't heard his name said more is because of all of the narrative pieces around the Bucks as well, with Adrian Griffin and the perspective that, hey, perception like, hey, Giannis, that was Giannis's guy. And now his coach is fired. And now it's a new coach coming in. And for some reason, it seems like he's getting knocked for that. And of course, when you made the coaching switch, the Bucks lost a few games in a row there. There was talk about that. But coming out of the break, 6-1 now. I think they have about like 19 games left, 19 games left on the schedule. And more than half of those are going to be on national TV. So as voters and people are really starting to hone in on who they're going to vote for, who should be the most deserving candidate, so on and so forth. If the Bucks take care of business, if they play well against this tough slate of competition on these nationally scheduled games as well, it should help his case. Like if I had a couple of dollars just to throw at the odds, because the odds for Giannis to win are so large right now, it's like might not win it, but if I do, like it's going to be a big come up, and I could see why one might do that.
So you mentioned some of the advanced numbers. Right now, Giannis has a 632 effective field goal percentage, which would be the highest of his career. And that's the tricky part with effective field goal percentage is when you look at the leaders, it's tough to really gauge. Like it's easier to point to, hey, this was the highest scoring average that we had seen in NBA history, but effective field goal percentage is different just because if you're a big and most of your shots are going to be on lobs and around the rim, you're going to be very efficient and you're going to have a high effective field goal percentage and you're going to meet the games played to qualify for it as well. So right now, I believe it's like the 50th highest in NBA history, which in itself is an accomplishment when you think about the amount of times Giannis is touching the ball, where he's shooting from. He's not just run and dunk guy. Right. I mean, the other ones that stand out, Duncan Robinson, the year that he really broke out, had a huge effective field goal percentage. Nikola Jokic did last year as well when he was at 66%. But other than that, you know, it's basically Giannis that you would look at and say, man, this is incredible. Grayson Allen, our old friend, is up there this season as well, and what's been an incredible season for him. So there's a handful that you would look at where you would say it's not just bigs that are around the basket and getting it that way, but the fact that Giannis is there with what he's doing, with everything else that he's taken on this season, you know, in some ways, I know it's not a like for like, and it's not the perfect comp, but in some ways it does remind me of, what was it, LeBron's second season in Miami, where it was just like he had the mindset of, I'm only taking efficient shots. I'm going to boost my shooting percentage and my effective field goal percentage, and I'm only making the smart plays here. I'm not hunting as many threes. I'm working in the post. That's basically what we've seen from Giannis. Now, we did see more three-pointers against the Warriors, and all those came in the first quarter, and I kind of joked about it with somebody else during a break, too, of, and I don't know about seeing the video clip of Giannis knocking down, 11 straight threes and not missing in practice. Like, that's all well and good, but maybe let's just stick to the bread and butter. But that's what jumps off the page the most to me is how much he's touching the ball, how much he's responsible for this offense, especially as Damian Lillard continues to figure things out. And by the way, as we touched on, get better while he's doing it. He's been very effective coming out of the All-Star break. The fact that Giannis has maintained this efficiency, and it's not even maintained, increased his efficiency with everything that's being asked of him. And the toughest part, too, is there's no way to really calculate this next part, what he's taken on defensively, because it's a much different approach. You've gone through different defensive models this season, but with no Drew Holiday, we all kind of anticipated this to be the case, knowing Giannis is going to have to take on more, and we're going to need more from Giannis on the perimeter, especially. I think he's grown as a perimeter defender. I've talked about this with a few other people. As much as Giannis is skilled as a defensive player, he's incredible as a help defender. I think there have been some areas for improvement on the perimeter, and I think we've seen a lot of that this season. So all things considered, all the changes that this team has gone through, how he's increased things defensively as well, for him to be posting these numbers of efficiency, to me, it right there is the case of, look, it's been a year of change for the Bucks. The constant has been Giannis, and that constant has improved from start to finish.
And he should get credit for it being that constant. Like, there was talk ahead of the season, like, well, I don't know if you can be MVP if you have Damian Lillard on your team. Like, now you have another superstar on your team. And sometimes the battling superstar narrative is like, well, are you really most valuable? Because look at who your number 2 is, or who your 1A, your 1B is to, on your team. So, like, sometimes you get knocked for that. But Giannis's numbers are actually like better. No one in league history has ever averaged over 30 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists while shooting at least 60% from the field. And Giannis is on pace to be the first player in NBA history to do that. Now, all statistics and like whatever stat line you want to go with is all arbitrary. Like, you can pick whatever and say like, no one has done this. And it's like, okay, well, that's, yeah, okay, sure. But it's impressive to see what he's been able to do while adjusting to having a superstar point guard next to him who's also trying to get comfortable along the way as well. And you mentioned the defense coming into the season. I know Giannis made it a point, like, I'm coming, like, I'm ready for it. And Griff was saying like, hey, we're going to let you be out here getting some tougher defensive assignments, seeing what you can do. And earlier, Giannis, like when he was younger, perimeter defense, I felt like sometimes he has like that, how do I say this? The Nasus energy when he's playing defense on the perimeter, where it's kind of aggressive. It's a lot of moving. It's very aggressive. You can foul a lot. And he's cut down on that this season when he is a perimeter defender. Now, Doc moving him back into his sweet spot of being that help defender. Of course, he's one of the best in the league. So why wouldn't you take advantage of that? But being able to see him switch on to different matchups and just what he's able to do in that one-on-one has been impressive. Like, was it the Chicago game? Was it Kobe White trying to ISO up Giannis? And it's like, no, give me those cookies and I'm out the other way. Like, it's stuff like that where you're like, he's a 7-footer playing perimeter defense on a guard and taking the guard's cookies. Like, Giannis has been playing great defensively. I believe he was my preseason defensive player of the year pick, which I don't think it's going that way anymore. But when you add on the defensive side of what he does, in addition to the offensive load that he carries for this team, like, just a complete package of a player, and definitely should be getting the consideration for MVP.
I mentioned some of the betting odds, and that usually is the best indicator. So we will continue this conversation coming up after the break, because there's some other numbers to distill as well, and a couple of gripes that I have with all the numbers that we throw out there. So we'll continue on this MVP campaign for Giannis, wrap up that conversation coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh Lloyd has picked out for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Players of the Week. Look, there's a number of names that we can choose from, but one that stands out to me is Kyle Lowry. As much as Bucks fans don't like that name of Kyle Lowry, there's a lot of opportunities. DeAnthony Melton is on the sidelines for the 76ers, and now Tyrese Maxey dealing with concussion as well. Nick Nurse has that familiarity with Kyle Lowry, and Kyle Lowry's looked pretty good so far in his start to the Philadelphia 76ers career. So Nick Nurse leaning on some of the old vets. Kyle Lowry, one of those. He's been very useful so far for the 76ers, but injuries continuing to open the door. Look, somebody's got to score. No Joel Embiid. Who knows about Tyrese Maxey's return? Tobias Harris has been very up and down. So Kyle Lowry, with that familiarity with what Nick Nurse runs, to me seems like your best bet for this fantasy pick of the week. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It is the same with your vehicle. Over 122 million parts, 122 million for your number one ride or die. You can find that at eBay Motors. You can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I want to remind you as well, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It is now available on Amazon Fire TV as well in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day from the local experts you've come to expect from Locked On, plus all the national shows we do covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Those betting odds, the latest I saw, Nikola Jokic still the favorite, minus 140. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is plus 220. He has the second best odds. Luka Doncic is third at plus 450. So in other words, you bet $100, you win $450. And for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, about twice the odds of Luka Doncic, and then Nikola Jokic, even better odds than the three of them. That's what stood out to me the most, though, is Luka Doncic, at least in the betting market, is still in front of Giannis. And look, I know there's a lot that goes into it. And this was the conversation I mentioned at Inside the NBA last night, was how much does team success and standings have to do with this conversation? Right now, the Bucks have the second best record in the Eastern Conference, and playoff status, which we've referenced quite a bit on this pod as well, has the Bucks with basically a 50-50 chance of second or third. They have a 43% chance of the 2 seed, 36% chance to get the 3 seed, and then it drops off dramatically. So in other words, they feel pretty strongly the Bucks are going to be one of those 2 seeds. The Cavs have a 46% chance at the 2 seed, so slightly higher than the Bucks, and a 31% chance at the 3 seed, just below them. So the Bucks are likely to finish second or third in their conference. The Dallas Mavericks right now are in the play-in tournament, and I get the Western Conference is a different story than the East, but to me, Camille, we've talked about this before. Russell Westbrook did it as I think a 6 seed when the Thunder, and he won the MVP in a triple-double season. I just think that was such an anomaly, and it was Russell Westbrook doing that for the first time since we saw Oscar Robertson do it. There was a lot more that went into it as well, where that was the year after Kevin Durant had bolted too. That felt like more of a narrative reward type of MVP. I just don't see anybody that is below even fourth you could somewhat make a case for, but it seems like third is the cutoff line of, if you're that valuable, your team better be in the top 3 in their conference.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luka has been playing some outstanding basketball. Like the numbers that he's putting up, we're at a time in the NBA right now where there's just a lot of talent around the league. So whenever I normally engage in MVP conversations, I always say, like, if I'm saying that I think it's so-and-so, this is not me saying that everyone else is trash. Like that is not what the conversation is. It's just me saying, amongst all this greatness here, here's who I think is actually doing the best amongst the greats. And with that, like, again, I give a lot of credit to Luka and the numbers that he's been putting up this season. It has been outstanding watching him play. I love watching Luka play. I believe he's also in pace to try to set some NBA history with his stat line that he's averaging. I think like the first to average 39 and 8 or something like that. But it's the record piece of it for me. The old thing used to be best player, best team, MVP, but that has not been the case. Like that's changed. And I think the Russell Westbrook conversation around that helped change the focus a little bit. Not saying that many 6 seeds are going to have an MVP on their team, but it kind of changed the dynamics of it. And I feel like narrative also does play a part in the MVP race at this point. Like you have to have the numbers for sure, but is there also a compelling story around it to kind of help nudge you above everyone else putting up great numbers as well? And that's the piece of it for right now, the Bucks, where I feel like Giannis doesn't have that. But if they can make this run and finish the season really strong with him continuing to play at a high level, that swings back in his favor. And I'm not sure if he can pass Jokic at this point, even if he has a strong finish. But I think like at least finishing second, like that should be in play for Giannis. I mean, anything can happen. I'm not wishing ill on anybody, but there's a way for Giannis to catch Jokic at some point. We don't know what happens going forward, but it needs a narrative piece. You need the numbers, and you have to have a team playing well. And the Bucks have come out the break looking good. The defense has been the piece of it before, because the questions around the team before were like, hey, if you have your Brook Lopez and your Giannis, why is this defense so bad? Why is it so bad? And here they are now. Giannis is still putting up his numbers offensively, and the defense for the team has come around. You're seeing the highlight plays of Giannis making great defensive plays as well. So it's all in there, and it's just around like how much more can he do to help bolster his case while also seeing what the Nuggets are doing. Like Jokic has to have a drop in his play some way, somehow, some shape, some form, I think, for Giannis to catch him at this point. And it's, again, I love Giannis. I would love for him to be MVP. But this season, I'm not sure how likely it's going to be for him to be able to catch Jokic with the way that he's been playing in Denver. But hey, if anything, I'd rather have a finals MVP if we can get that for Giannis.
Well, it's hard to believe it if he does not win it this year. He's going to be 4 years removed from his last MVP. And, he's still very much in his prime. And as we've said, early in his career, the big talking point with Giannis, and not that this has gone away, but the drive and the work ethic, but especially every single statistic improved year over year over year up until the MVP season, I think it was. And he's continuing to get better. Luka Doncic, to your main point of, look, this isn't to discount any of the cases, because it really shines a light on just how much talent there is in the league. When you think back to old MVP discussions, that it was pretty much one or two guys you could really make the case for in years past, when it was, last year, Giannis should have been included even more. And that's unfortunately becoming the trend of, wait a minute, why aren't we mentioning him? And why aren't we putting his name with these other two? But it was either Jokic or Joel Embiid. The years where it was either Giannis or James Harden. The Westbrook year too. It's been like this for a while now. And so this year, to have guys, at least 4 of them, that you could make a very legitimate case for, to say, look, they should be the MVP, speaks to how much talent there is in the league. You mentioned too the Giannis statistics. And look, one of my gripes with the trade machine, whatever variation of it you use, whatever site you go to, is, it's great. It's not a video game. I understand these salaries would work, but why would these teams do it? And then you just see all of these things gain traction of, well, they could make this move. Like, sure, but answer this. Why would one of those two teams make that trade? So as much as I love playing with it, it's one of the worst things that's happened to basketball discourse. StatHead and Basketball Reference and their stat site is pretty similar too, where we can cherry pick X, Y, Z and the numbers too, when we're getting into non-rounded numbers of, 30, 13, and 6. Like, nobody's ever done that before. Like, okay, great. But now it feels like we're cherry picking and finding numbers to lay out this case. I'll distill it even further, though. Giannis would be the only player in NBA history to score 30 points a game and shoot better than 60% from the field. Like, I understand this is the offensive era of the league, but that in itself is still remarkable. And that needs to be one of the larger things in that MVP case for Giannis. Luka, as we mentioned, 5 straight 30-point triple-double games. First player since Russell Westbrook to do that. Nikola Jokic, nightly that he's done it. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, to me, I still don't think Giannis is going to move past him. I know we mentioned they're basically neck and neck in that Basketball Reference sense, but in the betting odds, it's still not there. For Shai, the case is consistency, that he has basically been, this is the remarkable part, a guaranteed 30 points a night. When you look up and down every time, when you see the Thunder play and you look at the box score, and we'll see it twice, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scores 30 points, essentially, right at his season average. I think he has 40 30-point games this season out of 61 games played. He's been remarkable. I think he's been ahead of schedule. And the bigger part for them is, if the Thunder win, if the Thunder have the number 1 record in the Western Conference, boy, that's going to be hard to keep him out of there. As great as Nikola Jokic has been, the Denver Nuggets have a chance to finish with the top record in the Western Conference as well. And that's the one thing that's going to go against Giannis is, but they couldn't catch the Boston Celtics. And the other narrative of, look, there's two very lazy narratives that are going to be out there and are ultimately going to be anchors on Giannis. That is, he got his coach fired, is what's going to be put out there. And, well, you got Damian Lillard, so you guys should be the 1 seed. You should be much better than this. And look, as we've talked about and documented all throughout the season, it's not that easy. It's not NBA 2K where you just plug and play. And you have seen the signs of, I feel good about where this is going in the playoffs. That's not stuff that helps you in an MVP campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with Shea as well is that I thought the Thunder would be improved this season. Like you saw it last year coming on. I did not see them being this improved this season.
Outside of Oklahoma, nobody saw this. Right. Like we thought maybe they can be a top 4 seed. Very similar to, not to cut you off, when Bud took over, and that was the same conversation Bucks fans were having of home court advantage if we can be a top 4 seed and win a first-round series, and then all of a sudden you're the 1 seed.
That adds to the case, I think. And I just want to end here with this part about Giannis and the shooting 60% from the field while scoring at least 30 points. We mentioned he's a big. That happens. But to be the first person in NBA history with that stat, that means Shaq didn't do it. Right. That means Wilt didn't do it. That means throwing any dominant big man that you want to highlight and say, in their area, they were always around the basket too. They've never done it with this level of efficiency that Giannis is doing. And he's doing that, as we've mentioned, while he's adjusting to playing somewhat of a little bit of a different role, not having the ball in his hands as often as he's been used to here in Milwaukee, while sharing that with Damian Lillard, while undergoing various system changes of how they're playing basketball this season. He has been consistent throughout the entire season. And now at this point, while the team is really starting to come together, and again, tonight's game against the Lakers is going to be another chance to showcase that MVP case for him. I hope the Achilles is feeling good for him. But it's impressive. That is something that's never been done. Like we said, all stats are arbitrary. You can pick a line and say, this is the first time this has been done. But to put in the context of 60%, 30 points, again, round numbers always feel are easier to be we can make this our arbitrary line here. But to do something that even the most dominant big men have never done in the game before, knowing how many we've had, that's super impressive.
It's incredibly impressive. And look, the opportunity is for the Bucks to have a very good record in these final, 19, 18 games that they have left, to finish strong there and to win those matchups. If you sweep the Thunder and if Giannis looks incredible in those games, starting tonight against the Lakers, if Giannis goes out on national TV, we think he's going to play. He's listed as probable and has big games. That's the best opportunity for Giannis. If you can pull ahead and finish second in the East, and the optics of how you do it, that's going to lay out the best case for him. I mentioned the injury report update for Giannis. There is no update for Khris Middleton. So we'll wrap up the show with some thoughts on that. And the interview that Khris Middleton just did with Eric Nehm of The Athletic. We'll get into the particulars of that conversation next on Locked On Bucks. Well, we mentioned today's show is sponsored by LinkedIn. And look, LinkedIn is not just another job board. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for that role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And that's because LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing so many hats, they might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Camille, it's going to be another game with no Khris Middleton for the Bucks, as the injury report once again has him listed as out. I think at this point, you have to assume any return for Khris Middleton probably isn't going to come until the Bucks are off the road. Now, I hope to be proven wrong, but you got a day game on Sunday. I know there's a day of rest in between then, and then more travel somewhat to Sacramento before coming home. I think if we're going to start to put targets out there for when we could see him, probably would start with the 14th when you return home to take on the 76ers. Then you get 2 days off, and then you have the Phoenix Suns at home once again. So it's starting to feel like we're not going to see him on this road trip, which again, as we've discussed, I don't care when we see Khris Middleton. I'd like to see him for a little bit of action before the postseason, but as long as he feels 100% good to go and you have him for the postseason, that's all that matters. And that's what he kind of got into as well in that interview that we discussed that he just did with Eric Nehm on The Athletic.
Absolutely. And we also mentioned the fact that different sprains, all sprains are not the same. Like there's different degrees of sprains. And we just guessed based on how he played and how he didn't come back and how long that has been that it was a very severe sprained ankle. And in the interview with Eric, he mentioned the fact like I've never had an ankle sprain this bad before. And after it happened, I tried to play, run it off a little bit, see if it was going to loosen up. Did not happen. So I went to the back, tried to get retaped up, and as soon as the shoe came off, like my ankle just swelled all the way up. And that's the piece of it right now that Khris is trying to wait to get back from. It's the last little bit of swelling on that ankle that he has, and he's like, it's just taking time. Like it's frustrating. It can be frustrating for sure, but like I just have to wait for the swelling to get out. Like it was a lot initially, most of it's gone. Just waiting to get this last little bit out so I can play pain-free. So again, Doc has mentioned already, this was a playoff game. Khris could have probably played. And Khris himself said, I'm close. Like, I might be able to come back during this road trip, but like, I know I'm very, very close to returning. And that's just how it is with ankles. And the fact that the Bucks are saying, like, we want it to be 100% pain-free, not, okay, you're 80, you can deal with the pain levels that you currently have and play through because we need you on the court. Like, it's like, no, take your time, get 100%, and then we're going to bring you back slowly. And the bringing him back slowly, he was mentioning as well, and Doc said the same thing. Like, it's not so much because of the ankle to bring him back slowly, but getting his lungs back, getting conditioning back, just to be able to be ready to play the high minutes load that's going to be required of him in the playoffs. So I'm holding out hope that, you know, it's a quick return from him now at this point. It's been over a month since he sprained his ankle, which apparently was a very, very bad sprain. I enjoy hearing the fact that, you know, he's been around the team. I love that he also said, like, I'm here because I want to cheer my guys on. And it's like, what can you learn from, you know, being on the bench? And it's like, yeah, I mean, I can learn, but like, I want to play. So for anybody who thinks like he's injured and he's just collecting a check and it's like, I'm not trying to get back out there. Like, no, he wants to play ball. The Bucks are just being very cautious with him because they understand, as well as me and you do, like how important he is to this team. And when Khris Middleton is healthy as your third option with Giannis and Dame out there, it just does so much for the offense with them out there, but as well as being able to anchor some of these bench units that we've been seeing out here when Dame and or Giannis need to get a rest as well.
Yeah, and that's the big thing that we've discussed before too, is this a lot different if you didn't make the Damian Lillard trade, because it's not to diminish what Drew Holiday brought. Your defense would probably be in a much better spot and wouldn't have been down to 22nd at some point during the season. But what you're asking of Khris Middleton is much more if you don't make that trade. And to me, that's the big thing that was always important to keep in mind, is how much time it would buy you with Khris Middleton and how you could utilize him. So I do think that's very favorable for this team as they get set to move into the postseason, and allows them to take their time, where it's not just, man, we better hold teams to 110 or so because it's and look, they've been consistently doing that, but we're going to have to win with our defense because it's Giannis and it's Drew Holiday. We know he's a capable scorer, but he can be streaky, and there are ways to slow down that offense. So what Damian Lillard has brought, and the biggest part of it too, is when we point to the numbers of Giannis, A lot of that is Damian Lillard when you think about the spacing that he's created, and to a lesser extent, Malik Beasley, too, with what he had done shooting the basketball so far this season, that we do have to take those things into account, too, of maybe Giannis's numbers aren't quite as good if you don't have Damian Lillard on the floor, and it also allows you to take your time with Khris Middleton. So TBD on when we see him back. And I will say this as we wrap up here, it does seem as though the frustration has started to dissipate with Bucks fans. So you haven't heard quite as much of he's injury prone or when's he going to get back on the floor, that it does seem like there is more of an understanding of, as long as he's healthy, fine. We need him for the playoffs. As long as we have a healthy Khris Middleton in the playoffs, fine. This team's going to continue to get better and learn how to play with each other. You'd like Khris Middleton in the mix for that, but we get that it's a big picture thing, and it's not just we got to get Khris Middleton back on the floor. So that's the encouraging part, that we've shifted further away from that conversation of can't rely on Khris Middleton or all the knocks that you would hear from some circles, that has slowly started to get more and more quiet. We got three games, I beg your pardon, to recap, but 2 over the weekend. The Bucks in Los Angeles tonight against the Lakers, and then Sunday afternoon against the Clippers. So we'll recap those games the next time you hear from us. And, depending on where things go in these next couple of days, on one of the shows next week, Camille, we're probably going to have to take a look at the bottom portion of the Eastern Conference standings, because I have long mentioned it's imperative for the Bucks, and you've brought it up too, to finish second or third in the Eastern Conference because of what that would mean. Well, slowly but surely, things are starting to change drastically for those teams that would be on the one side of the bracket, the 1 versus 4, and so on. I don't want to jinx anything, but with those injuries Philadelphia is dealing with, and by the numbers and the odds that we pointed to, there is a decent chance at this point that the Philadelphia 76ers could drop down to 9th in the Eastern Conference. By the numbers, it is very much in play. And what that would mean is they could only play the 1 seed. They would have to win 2 games to get that 8 seed. They would not be in that 7 matchup. And if you're the Bucks and there's a possibility that you're going to be the 2 seed, if you could pick, all right, here's the 7 and 8 teams that we can avoid or that we would play, I beg your pardon. If you got the Pacers versus Bulls, that seems like that would be the ideal 7-8 matchup for where things are headed. And that is definitely in play at this point. So once we get some more games under our belt, we'll take a look at the standings as well as we start to get into the stretch drive of this NBA season moving into the playoffs. More late night basketball tonight. No post-game pod, though, since it's a Friday. So we don't have to worry about staying up until 2 in the morning to recap this one. Though if you are looking for it, you can find me on WTMJ with the post-game show there. For Camille, I am Justin. We'll talk to you once again Monday morning with some more Locked On Bucks.